Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and imagine being a young woman, around 20 years old, in the 1960s, Jewish, of course, very bright, a free thinker, a free spirit, in college in New York City, and you fall madly in love with a dashing, charismatic, bright, interesting fellow student from Afghanistan, with the bearing of Afghan royalty, with whom you share a young person's world view. And then he asks you to marry him and to travel the world together. Then you say yes. And you do marry him. And then he brings you home to Kabul, Afghanistan, where you meet his family, his father's 3 wives, and an army of relatives, all of whom expect you, this young 20-year-old Jewish free spirit, to become a woman of Kabul, property of your husband, and a virtual prisoner in your own home. How in the world could that ever have happened to you? And then how would you cope? How would you survive? Well, this is not a hypothetical situation. This is exactly what happened to a remarkable woman who today is one of the most highly regarded feminists on the American scene, a psychotherapist who for many years was a professor of psychology at City University of New York, a wonderful writer, the author of 14 books, and a major figure in the Jewish world, addressing issues of feminism and anti-Semitism. You have no idea what a pleasure it is for me to be joined today by a woman I have enormous regard for. I love you very, very much. Phyllis Chesler, who's been contributing to Jewish life for the past 40 years and who has also written a marvelous, stunning memoir entitled An American Bride in Kabul, published by Macmillan. Phyllis, you have written an extraordinary book. And first of all, I've wanted you at this table for so long. Thank you for making the trip and sitting with me. It means the world to me.
It's really my pleasure to be here. Because remember, you interviewed me when I got the Emma Lazarus Award. And it was such a fine interview.
Thank you for saying that. Well, you're very dear to me. And I had no idea what I would find when I opened up and read An American Bride in Kabul. It is, by the way, the problem with the book, you don't ever want to stop. You open it, you cannot. It's a page turner, and it is just a gripping, gripping story. And I know you, and
have I paid you for this endorsement?
No, you have not. And I know you, and as I'm reading it, I keep saying to myself, how did this happen to you? How did this happen to you? And by the way, when I say that, all of us can be swept away. And you were, literally, how old were you?
20.
You were 20, okay. You were 20 years old, and you were an idealist, an extraordinary. I called you a free spirit, a free thinker, but you were a romantic, as you still are, and you were idealistic.
But I want to say something.
Okay.
Imagine, had I not gone on this rather dangerous adventure, which may have been beshert, destined, I couldn't be here now explaining what I really understand about Jews living in Muslim societies historically and about the nature of women and thinkers in Muslim societies.
So it did help you?
Well, all educations that are high quality are very expensive. And if you travel to the wild, wild East, you can lose your life. You can get very sick. I mean, I got very ill.
Yes, you did.
So it comes with the territory of this grand adventuring to the wild, wild East.
Okay. But are you saying to me, you could be saying one of two things, and I wanted you to clarify it for the audience. You could be saying that as difficult as it was, and you describe the difficulty, and obviously you're here, you do, I'm not sure the right word is escape, but you're able to leave and come home to America and to your parents. But the question is, are you glad it happened to you?
Oh, what a good question. I didn't anticipate this, and I had no plan to stay there. I thought it would be a visit. I had a semester of college left, and I was very intellectually ambitious. What happened to me, namely the removal of my American passport when we landed, having to live with my mother-in-law, which is pro forma in Kabul, Afghanistan, being expected to not bring dishonor on the family, but here I was, an infidel and a Jew and an American, was very challenging, but also very interesting. So in a sense, I joined Hashomeah Hatzair when I was 8 years old in Borough Park in Brooklyn. And mystical visions of Yishmael and Yitzchak living in peace and harmony. I guess I took it seriously, and I married Yishmael, you know, Abraham's other son. So although I didn't think of it that way at the time.
Right,
you know,
you did not.
At the time, I wanted to travel.
You also described you wanted to get out of your parents' home.
Oh, I left them a long time before. Looking back on it, of course, it's very poignant. They worked so hard to give me a quality education and to instill in me very fine values. Yet, I didn't get a bat mitzvah. Here I am, the smartest boy in the Hebrew school class in Borough Park. No bat mitzvah for you. I took it hard. And I also didn't see a future, as I do now, for Jewish women who wanted to plumb the depths of Jewish learning. So I began to leave when I was maybe 12, 13, 14. And I was in the city a lot, and I was studying painting and music and drama. So I was leaving Borough Park. I was leaving.
But every night you went home.
Until I went to college,
Okay,
yes.
Every night you went home. When you marry Abdul Karim?
It's not his real name, but it's the name I used.
Oh, very interesting. Okay,
Yes.
When you marry this man, whether you know you're going to live in Kabul and you don't, he sells you on this idea that you're going to travel the world, you're going to see the world
Yes.
with a very exciting, charismatic, dashing. I mean, the two of you are gorgeous. You're still gorgeous, but you still, when you see the pictures of you, both of you were, you know, I get chills thinking you were both marvelously good looking. You were both bright. You're both idealistic and with a, you know, secular socialist kind of overview. You're going into the world, but you're also, and unless I misread the book, you talk about how you had a very difficult relationship with your mother, and you wanted out of that. Am I wrong?
Well, that's another book that I wrote called Woman's Inhumanity.
Yes.
Woman, which is not about my mother, though. I couldn't be confined. I mean, even when
I want to know, were you leaving your mother? Was that?
Well, ironically, if that was true, I found something far more extreme.
Yes, you didn't know what you were getting
my
into.
Mother's
Right,
home.
right.
I found more misogyny, more fundamentalism, more patriarchy. So indeed, what I was fleeing, I embraced. I really learned that America is the best country in the world. And when I came back, I kissed the ground at Idlewild Airport, literally, the land of liberty and libraries. So I had already left psychologically. I mean, the rabbis, for example, yelled at me when I joined Hashomeah Hatzair. And I thought about it. And this is at 9 or 10 years old.
Unbelievable.
I said, okay, I joined Ein Harod, to the left of Hashomeah Hatzair, and how Jewish. And I packed machine gun parts for Israel in Borough Park. So I, in a sense, already was born a rebel. I was born
Yes, you were.
leaving, looking for more freedom, more justice over the horizon. My poor parents, imagine having me as a child, so demanding and so adventurous.
What were your
So,
parents' names?
Leon and Lillian, may they rest in peace.
Okay. It doesn't belong here in the story, but I still want to ask it now.
Go ahead.
When you do finally you are able to leave Kabul after really a harrowing experience, and you arrive at Idlewild, which is now JFK.
I took the first plane out I could get, which was Aeroflot, a flight that had landed, that had originated in Cairo, touched down in Kabul, went to Moscow, and I then changed for another plane to go to Copenhagen and then back to New York.
Okay. So they meet you in New York?
In New York. They said, I called, I said, guess who's back?
No.
Yes.
They don't know you're on the way back?
They didn't know. No.
So out of the blue,
blue,
their daughter calls. How long have you been away now?
5 full months.
And they get a call suddenly.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't matter what this is in sequence. They're not happy you marry him.
Oh, to say the least.
I mean, here you are, a nice Jewish girl, whether you're a rebel or not.
Yes.
You're a Jewish girl from a strong Jewish family.
Shocked.
And you're marrying a Muslim from Kabul.
Heartbroken. But they were very smart. They didn't tell a soul. They got me. They brought me home. My mother gives me a look like, so now you're back? Now you're sorry? Or she didn't quite say, I told you so. She said, I knew you would be back. Okay, fair enough.
It's not really
Never
fair.
told
It's not fair of
anyone.
her. Because you did not know you were going to Kabul, and then so she could not have known. You were going on a journey, an adventure. It turned out you were double-crossed.
This is true.
You were betrayed, but she couldn't have known that. But I want to know, when you came back, were your parents embracing of you, or were you still the girl, their daughter who had married a Muslim?
No, they embraced me.
Okay.
They embraced me.
And did you embrace them?
Yes.
You were wiser by then.
Wiser, but I left them again to complete my last semester of college. And we were very different from each other. And I have to give them credit for putting up with me and for giving me what I needed, and maybe credit for trying to stand in my way, which they were not successful at doing.
Okay, but you speak now with a great deal, it sounds sweet the way you talk about your parents. And I wonder, and again, this is off topic, but who cares? At what point does Phyllis Chesler have enough self-insight to forgive her parents and not worry about the grief she had? They gave you a lot of grief, and they stood in your way, and they weren't encouraging at all. But you speak of them in a very gentle, loving way. At what point in your life do you begin to realize that you can forgive them?
As I get older, and I'm a grandmother now, happy grandmother, I think they become more idealized. I begin to miss them and want them. I don't remember them when I was in their clutches, when I was at their mercy, when they were punishing me for my brilliance, when they were feeling sort of cut out of my life because of all of my other interests. I'm sure that my mother wanted a daughter who would be like her, a wife and mother who stayed at home and had children and went to synagogue or prepared the meals when the men came home from synagogue. So this was not me. So whatever, she tried very hard to shape me in her image, because mothers want daughters nearby. They want daughters to hold close to them. She knew I was gone, and she struggled against that. She also, like so many Jewish women, preferred boys to girls, and therefore preferred her sons to me, the firstborn. And I have to tell a story. I don't mean to do Lashon Hara, but I invited her to my first feminist lecture. It was in Great Neck, Long Island. I give the lecture, rousing ovation. What does she say to me afterwards? She said, "First, you don't look so good. You should see a doctor." I said, "Well, I am a doctor now." Then, it's like a bad joke. Then she says, "Phyllis, who's going to marry you if you say things like this?" So then I really started laughing. I said, "Didn't you hear a word I was saying?" So
she probably didn't.
She did not. And when I would publish 15 books, but she was alive for maybe 10 of them, she would say, "Ah, another book against the men." And I'd say, no, it's not against the men. But it's her upbringing was so European style. It was so Orthodox Jewish style. And she just enacted it. Now, my father was a freer spirit, and he was far more forgiving and far more passionate, emotional. He got me a little bit more. He got me and he loved me.
Your mother loved you too.
I have no doubt.
Yes.
I have no doubt.
Right.
I wish I could talk to her now.
Yes. Isn't it too bad we can't talk? Yes, it's a very profound statement you just made. But I want to just tell you, what happens to Phyllis is she gets married and she goes first to Paris, and then from Paris they go to Kabul, and she gets off the plane and she is swept into a world she never anticipated entering, in which she was treated really as any other Kabul woman who was property of her husband, and she is virtually isolated. Your husband withdraws from you. The way you describe it in the book, he's not, the relationship you have with him in America, in school, has nothing to do with the relationship you have with him in Kabul. And he gets up in the morning, he leaves you, you're with the women, and you describe how you learn how to sit and be patient. And none of that, you don't know the language. I mean, it's excruciating. When I read it, I just was so upset for you, you know.
All right, I appreciate it.
But my sense is that the relationship also with you and your husband, it's deteriorated, doesn't describe what happened. It just, it evaporated, right? It evaporated in front of you. And you describe how every time you tried to talk to him, he would pretend he didn't hear you, or he would leave the room, or he would ignore you, or he would be very condescending to you, you know, patronizing of you. And he kept saying to you, and you write this over and over in the book, don't you want good from me? It's as if whatever you were doing was somehow going to reflect on him in terms of the eyes of all the other Afghan men, and would be a tremendous detriment to him in whatever he hoped he would be and become in Afghanistan. So this is what happens to Phyllis, and it is wonderful. She's a great writer. It's wonderfully written, and you read day after day after day, and she takes you in relationship with her mother-in-law, and then there are these other women who the grandfather, meaning the father of her husband, is married to, and she goes to each of them, and they have children. And ultimately, your own mother-in-law, the mother of your husband, is not nice to you.
No. By the way, what happened to me is pro forma. Most women, very few exceptions, who marry Muslim men and live in Muslim countries have a similar experience. And I tell some of
whether
their
they're
tales.
foreign or not? Or are you talking about foreign women?
Foreign women have the experience. They are seduced, they are enamored, and then their hopes are dashed, and everything is different, and they had no idea, so that they were tricked or betrayed. Now, if you're brought up in Kabul, as a woman, you expect
You know
this.
it's coming,
You
right?
know you're going to live with your mother-in-law. She has the right to beat you, just as she has the right to beat her female servants, just as polygamy is okay, just as half-siblings vie desperately for their father's attention and inheritance. So polygamy is not a very good idea for the children. Forget about the co-wives. And I got to see this very up close. Ditto the veil. When I first saw women in burqas at the back of the bus, literally, before Rosa Parks in Kabul, I was horrified. And when I announced my horror at home, oh, you Americans, oh, you're very impatient, it's soon going to be gone, don't worry, it's on its way out. Well, that didn't turn out to be exactly the case, because Islamic countries have taken a very savage turn back to barbarism. So, but my husband was a dreamer, and he hoped to modernize this country, and he thought my role would be that of a wife. I was aghast, you know, and that it would be okay for me to stay at home in Purdah with mainly other women. And indeed, ironically, as you were speaking, I thought, well, it's like he's going to Cheder to study every day, you know, and I don't get to see him until midnight, and then only for a moment, and I'm at home with the children and the women. So it was the Muslim version of that. And I think I have to tell one anecdote. There I am sunbathing on a terrace in a bikini reading War and Peace. and, you know, trying to spend my time. And a commotion ensues. In the middle of the day, my husband barges in, come right in, come in, don't ask any questions. And he looked really upset. It seems that workmen a quarter of a mile away thought they saw a naked woman and couldn't concentrate. And this is long before the Taliban. And I had to come inside because my husband said, if you don't, by evening, all of Kabul will think we're running a brothel. And I must stress, this is before the Taliban. What am I saying? That a lot of these customs that are human rights violations have nothing to do with colonialism or imperialism or foreign occupation or war. These customs are endemic, they are tribal in that region and elsewhere, and I stand against them. And I learned about them with street cred. I learned about them on the spot. I didn't study it from afar.
Okay. Again, I'm just giving the arc of the story. The arc of the story is Phyllis finds herself in this horrendous situation. And the question is, how does she cope? You read it in the book. And in the end, after a very, very severe illness, lucky her husband's father, who is like a god there, decides he's going to let Phyllis go back to America for medical reasons, and she's lost her passport. She referred to that already, and they won't ever give her American passport again. To this day, she doesn't have her American passport from then. They give her an Afghanistan passport. She gets on a plane, and she is free for the first time in months and months and months. It must have seemed like years to you, but she's now free. That's the arc. And by the way, the book is very interesting. The book deals, the first 7 chapters deals with all the life up to the point she's able to return from this horror. And then she describes the next 7 chapters are all about what happens to her in her life when she's back, and how in this sort of remarkable way she ends up being friends with this man who had really, in my mind, absolutely betrayed her. And he was a very bright guy. He had to know what he was doing to Phyllis. That's the story. Read it. Now, I want to ask her certain questions that come out of that story. And the first question is this. You were not a religious, observant Jew, but you came from a very Jewish family, and your parents were.
Yes.
When you came to Kabul, you had absolutely no intention of not being a Jew. You were a Jew. There's there's the syndrome that happens sometimes when people are held captive. And I want to know, what was it? Because ultimately, Phyllis does. You go through, it's silly the way it sounds, but the reality is they wanted you to become Muslim. They wanted you to embrace Islam. And you do.
This happens to every infidel wife. There are no exceptions. And what happened is I had the Kabul trots, dysentery, and I then was moving into hepatitis, from which I nearly died. I was totally in my mother-in-law's clutches, and every day, you know, she's bringing me prayer rugs and prayer beads, and I decided, well, she's already poisoning my food, and it was literal.
Yes, that's right.
Because the servants were no longer boiling my water.
It's amazing.
And they were cooking with ghee, which I couldn't digest, or my fruits and vegetables, very dangerous to a foreign stomach. And I said, okay, fine. I convert. Leave me alone.
It was, you'll do anything at that point.
I did not, for 1 minute, take it seriously.
Okay.
Nor did she, by the way, because she was pretty soon thereafter calling me Yahud, Yahud.
Jew.
So, yes. But for what it's worth, she beamed, and she went and told her relatives. She's converted one of them. And I never told anybody, never told anyone. Because, and I talked to some rabbis, it doesn't count, forget about it, it didn't happen. And I never did anything Islamic. My Afghan husband is not at all religious. He never goes to mosque, ever, not at all. We never even discussed religion. We discussed opera and film and literature. So, however, when I came to tell this story, I decided to find out about the Jews of Afghanistan and what happened to them. And I have a chapter about it, as you know. as a form of atonement. There are many Jews who died rather than convert at the edge of a sword. There are some great Jews who converted to save their lives and then made away, didn't practice anything, or who practiced Judaism secretly. So we have both traditions. I found out something very shocking, that my father-in-law, who was one of the 3 founders of the modern banking system of that country, he gained all his wealth. And he didn't do it. It was a former king, Nadir Shah, and before him, Amanullah, the emancipator king, who impoverished the Jews and Hindus of Afghanistan overnight, and they were no longer the equivalent of bankers, importers, traders, coin exchanges, merchants. They lost all their far-flung outposts. And that is how I came to meet my Afghan husband, because from such wealth, they could send a son abroad for a decade. He was here in America for a decade. And I felt I must tell this story. And I never met a Jew in Afghanistan. There were some there. My mother-in-law kept asking me if I knew the Shabans or the Shabanese. She went like this, you know, how close friends. And they were Jews, but I'm sure that as soon as they were able to leave, they left either for America or Israel. And so at home, in a home atmosphere in Purda, the women don't go to mosques. If they pray in their rooms 5 times a day by themselves.
Only the men go to the mosques.
The men go to the mosques, but they don't always go. What if they're major business people or major government officials? They might not. They might just pray where they are. So I certainly did not take the veil in any sense of the word. And I had scarves put out for me, wear hijab at least, because the very fashionable women of my family did that. I never did that. I sort of tossed them in a heap. I didn't take the veil either in terms of Islamic religion, nor did I take the veil about the barbarism and the misogyny that I was encountering and enduring. I in no way, and there are others who, a number of women who've been kidnapped by the Taliban. One, Yvonne Ridley, for example, has become a screaming fanatic Muslim talking about Palestinian blood of our brothers flowing in the streets, a serious anti-Zionist. Another woman, Margaret Marcus from Mamaroneck, became a Muslim and went to live in Pakistan and became a chief propagandist for the most extreme Islamic, the worst kinds of Islamist people. So that was not me. I remained Western, I remained American, I remained clear. I think this experience turned me into a firebrand feminist for life. And where feminists in America or in the West today talk more about Islamophobia and anti-racism and are worried lest they criticize anything that anybody in the Muslim world does, I have no fear of doing that. And I work with Muslim feminists and with ex-Muslim dissidents, and they appreciate what I know and they trust what I know. Let me say that it wasn't so easy for me because he didn't want a divorce and he kept coming to America to try to persuade me to return. And he did not agree to a divorce, and I had to, with 3 lawyers, had to move for an annulment, which I ultimately got. And the grounds are very interesting. My parents came up with these grounds, that he had promised me beforehand to convert to Orthodox Judaism, and since he lied to me and didn't, it was null and void. Then the State Department in America, they said, your 6-month visa is up on your Afghan passport, you have to go. I said, chaining myself to the Statue of Liberty as we speak. So I eventually got an American passport, I got an annulment, but it was very treacherous for nearly 3 years.
Did that frighten you at all at the time?
Yes. Yes, but at some level, I knew that I'd be okay.
Okay.
At some level, I've always known that I'm very blessed by God. And why else could I have survived? That's another thing. I could have died so easily and been buried in a Muslim cemetery, and my work would never have happened. Maybe somebody's looking over me.
Okay.
You know, I mean, who knows?
Okay. Again, it's a very detailed book. There is no reference. There's a reference to the fact that at a given point in time, your husband decides the way he's going to keep you in Kabul is get you pregnant.
Yep.
And in fact, you become pregnant, and then you lose the baby much later through a miscarriage. Prior to that description, when your husband decides and you're sick, I mean, but he's determined that you will become pregnant. There's no reference at all to any kind of intimacy between you and your husband when you get to Kabul. And I wanted to know, is that because you just didn't want to put it in here? Or in fact, did the Kabul setting destroy the chemistry or the intimacy that you'd had before you went?
I'd say that it slowly eroded it because I could not live there and did not understand how he could live there. I thought he was I said, get out before it's too late. I was heartbroken and angry. I was angry. And then I was desperate to escape, and I had many plans, and none of them worked. Now, had he known that I was pregnant, I would not have been allowed to leave, and I would have died in childbirth. And it would have been a very deformed baby because I was very ill with hepatitis, which I was told killed every other foreigner that season. So I would have walked out. I was already making inquiries, and somebody told me that James Michener heard of my story, and he wrote Caravans and had a very negative kind of heroine from America who ultimately marries a Nazi doctor there or takes up with one, and who does run away with the Kuchis, the nomads. And that's a hard, you know, I arrive in Kabul, and it's like, you know, remember the old notebooks with Rambam on the front of it?
Absolutely.
There it was, men in turbans, camels, nomads, women with jewelry tinkling. It was a very biblical place, and scholars have indeed suggested that yet the lost tribes, are there, and they're the Pashtuns. It's not totally fanciful, not totally, but, you know, with a grain of salt, it must be taken. So, he began to rape me. By that time, I was not interested in him. I was very interested in leaving. He was petrified because he was being watched closely by the king and by the government and by his father because he was away for 10 years. He has to prove he's really an Afghan guy. He was under enormous pressure, and he expected me to help him do that. I didn't know that was my job description, so I didn't take the job. So he was desperate to keep me. Now, think for a minute. Shame. I've been studying honor killings, and I'm now working on my 4th study on honor killings, which Hindus do in India and Muslims do in the West and in the Muslim world. And he was shamed by me. I was the cow. I was property, and I got away. I ran away. What kind of man is he? So he may have had tender feelings for me, too. But he had to get me back, and he could not get me back. And we never discussed this, you know. When he knocked on my door, when he fled just before the Soviets invaded, I had a choice. I could have said, leave me. But I was very safe. I had already published 3 books. I was a professor at a university. I had a young son. What harm could he do me? None. I was no longer at his mercy. So I said, as a Jew, as an American, we welcome immigrants who come knocking at the door. And we've had a formal relationship, distant, extended family involvement. I'm always known as the first wife, which is kind of interesting. I became friendly with his wife, who's died recently. I think, well, it didn't make peace between the Arabs and the Jews. It didn't do that. But I tried in my very strange way.
Okay, so you've anticipated the last question in this train of thought. And I understand somewhat what brought you to marry this man and travel to Kabul. Actually, I should say marry the man. You didn't know why you were going to Kabul at the time. And then the world fell in on you. But one could say, holy cow, Phyllis, why did you even marry this guy? I can understand why you married him at 20 years old. Phyllis, I'm having a hard time that you were so nice to him when he came to America. I'm having a real hard time.
Oh, you're not
that.
a writer. You're not a writer. Are you kidding? Do you understand what a treasure to a writer?
Yes, but that's not why you were nice to him.
Wait
Come
a minute.
on. That's not why you were nice to him.
Excuse me.
You saw a book there. That's not why you were nice to him.
Well, I didn't see a book there,
But wait,
no.
one of the things I kept telling myself was, I know you a little bit. It's not like you can't get angry, Phyllis. You're able to get angry. I say to myself, how angry must Phyllis have been, even at 20, when you realize how you've been betrayed? Phyllis, you were betrayed. And this guy was smart enough to know what he did to you, you had no idea was going to happen to you.
Now I'm going to say something deep. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers. And he nevertheless, from a position of power and safety, saw that there was a divine hand in it all, and he forgave them. I am not Joseph, but I didn't harbor a continuing, festering grudge. On the contrary, this was a kinship that I have with the peoples of the East, certainly beginning with Jews, but also Arabs and also Muslims. It's a very real kinship that I've been born with. I don't understand it. And what I've done with that betrayal is work for freedom among Muslims, work against terrorism and jihads, upholding Western civilizational principles. So I've turned it to good. I've turned it to good works. Now, he turns out to be a small person. He was a very big shot in his country. And he's, for example, never mentioned to me anything about my books. But one day, and I have this in the book, one day he says, let's go to Fine and Shapiro's. He'll meet me. You know, he wants a pastrami on rye. And
one of the great delis of New York.
Well, it used to be, not so much.
By the way, you're right.
Not so much. So
you know New York, don't you?
I do. So I said, how could you have brought me? It was the only time I said, how could you have brought me there? And he said, I thought you would be ambitious. I didn't know you would turn tail and run. He said, true, you've written a few books for a few circles, but how does that compare with helping me with my great dreams of bringing this country and these people into the modern world? And I'm looking at him, thinking, the height to be achieved of a woman is to be a wife to help a man who's great. Not so for me. Not so. So in this, he resembled my parents in a very strange way. So he's not a player in my life. I called him up before this book came out and told him I'd written a book. It was about us, but it was about more than just us. He didn't ask to see it. He hasn't called since. I saw that over the years, he and his family have become more hard-hearted towards Israel. That's when my back became steel. And I didn't like it, and I couldn't put up with it. And I haven't. So there's tension between us, and we haven't spoken for a while. I think someday he'll call again, and maybe not. I'm not the type that goes around being, and by the way, I'm not suggesting, therefore, we should get over the Al-Aqsa Intifada, as somebody has recently suggested in the pages of the New York Times. No. So there, when the danger continues and is very real, one has to be armed and guarded and vigilant and aware. But when there's no real danger, okay, you could let these go.
Okay. I try to be a lovely person, but I'm not as lovely as you. I would have really had an enormous. I would never have been able to forgive him for
What would
he
you
did.
do?
I would have nothing. But if he came, no, I would say, Harry, Mohammed, whatever his name is, I'm sorry. I don't want to see you again. I wish you. Go have a nice life. Don't ever think I want to speak to you, deal with you. I want nothing to do with you. What you did was unconscionable, one human being to another. By the way, he also, for a bright guy, he was bright, was he not? Okay. His sense of reality was warped by his own upbringing in society. There was no chance in hell that he was going to change Afghan society and that you were going to be a partner in that. It was just ludicrous. But he never said that to you at the time. In the privacy of your bedroom, he didn't say to you, look, Phyllis, I know how horrible this is. He would not even acknowledge to you how horrible the situation was for you. But he never said to you, Phyllis, just understand something. Be patient. We're going to work this out.
Oh, he said that.
No,
he
didn't
that
say.
all the time?
Yeah, but he said, be patient because and don't hurt me.
Yes.
Okay. He didn't say, ultimately, you and I are going to change the world, and you're going to have a major role in it.
What I think he envisioned, again, not my vision, was that he would have diplomatic-like status, which he ultimately did, and we would travel and go to parties. And
you'd still be property.
Enlarged.
You'd still be property.
Of course. Well, he's not a feminist.
But wait, you're not the. Those are not extremes. Either you're a feminist or you think you can enslave women.
Well, no.
There is something in the middle.
He could not himself come to grips with his country and his people and their customs because he was also Americanized. So what was shameful, you don't admit and you don't discuss. I mean, that's an Afghan way.
You give him more credit than I would. I don't believe that. I believe he ultimately was, he dabbled in America and he was Kabul all the way and he came back to Kabul and bang, he went right into that world and he wanted you to be in that world and he didn't care about you. He did not care about you. And I'm angry at him for you. I love you, and this is not acceptable for him to treat you the way he treated you.
Give you his phone number. You can call him up. Okay. No, I appreciate your anger on my behalf, my dignity dishonored. I appreciate it. But as a writer and as a thinker, I also have to admit it's a hell of a story.
That's right.
No,
that's right. That's just a hell of a story.
And I wouldn't know what I know.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah, but that means you have this gift where you can take a situation which was harrowing and harrowing. Horrible and harrowing, right?
And horrifying.
And you're able to use it for good.
Yeah.
And that's your strength. And I don't in any way I celebrate that. Good for you. We should all have more of that. Everybody in life has hard things happen to them. And if you can use it for good, then you've turned a moment into something magnificent. Good for you. But the moment itself has no redeeming quality essentially to it. You did something out of it. But I'm angry for you, and if you give me his number and I ever cross his path, I'll tell him it is unacceptable what he did. Human being to human being.
Wait.
Unacceptable.
I'll give you a mission. There are women in Afghanistan now who are very heroic and who are very endangered and who are very trapped, and they can use your righteous anger. And I don't think that the solution is more boots on the ground and more blood and treasure expended. I think the situation is indeed even more harrowing than my own right now, and not just Afghanistan, the entire Islamic world. And indeed, so I turn my anger about something that happened to me so long ago into good deeds on their behalf. And as you were speaking, I thought, well, you know, I always go to the kotel when I go to Israel. That's my thing. It's my shtick. And then there came a time when I was with the women who prayed for the first time in the Ezrat Nashim, and I was given the honor of opening the Torah for the women for the first time, which wedded me faithfully to this struggle, which is in its 26th year.
Called Women of the Wall.
Yes. So imagine the misogyny of the Haredim. Imagine the Israeli government not standing up to such violent intimidation and saying, okay, they're just girls, let the Haredim have the turf. So it's an awful scene, it's an awful situation, and I'm not the one who went around the world criticizing Israel on this ground. I was kept quiet during this last 12-year period, longer. But instead of walking away from that ugliness and that awfulness, we went to pray with the Torah. We formed 2 organizations. We had a lawsuit in the Israeli Supreme Court, which effectively we have won. What we have not yet won is the enforcement of our legal right to pray with the Torah in the women's section, for women only, not in a mixed gender minyan. So there's another example of a rather frightening, or who wants to pray if they're yelling and geschrying and saying, you know, you should die, you're Nazis, which they did. Don't go there. Right? It's an awful scene. And yet one can tzedek tirdaf with it. One can then use that, face it, and try to redeem it in some fashion. That's a work still in process. Mm-hmm. And imagine this country that kept me captive is the very country that gave shelter to bin Laden after Saudi Arabia and Sudan threw him out. And now we are all civilians held hostage to that brand of al-Qaeda terrorism. We are all Israelis now, in a sense, which I wrote in the book, The New Anti-Semitism. So an eerie coincidence, one that a thinker and writer such as myself is not going to let pass. So I try to make meaning out of what you're indignant about, my betrayal, my dangerous near-death experience.
I give you an enormous amount of credit. You said already that in some way the experience you had in Kabul helped shape. I believe you would be a feminist whether you went to Kabul or not. But it certainly sensitized you in a greater way. Is that fair to say?
Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
I want to make sure the audience does understand the nuance of what you're saying. There is within the Jewish world now a broad spectrum of how women are treated in terms of Jewish observance, from egalitarian forms of non-Orthodox Judaism. Then there's modern Orthodoxy, where you have women's minyan, and then you have the ultra-Orthodox or Haredi, who still create lifestyles and family situations where women are not given anywhere near the kind of access to education, ability to express themselves publicly that men have. And what you were involved with, the Women of the Wall, and Anat Hoffman, who's a dear friend of yours, is also associated with Women of the Wall.
Careful.
She's not?
It's not a question of friend or not friend. There has been a sad split in our group, which is important for everyone to understand, but few people do.
Please.
Anat went around during the Al-Aqsa Intifada criticizing Israel, and the New York Times was so happy to print every word.
That's true, and that's not where you are.
And that's not what
Correct.
I would do. And wait further, Anat and her version of Women of the Wall, and she has been very consistent and very brave, as have many other of our women, decided to go to Robinson's Arch, which is not the Kotel, and will never be a place for
and
all
let's make sure
Israel.
the audience knows. Basically, the recent compromise that was worked out is that the Western Wall, which is where everybody pictures the mechitza and the men stand on one side, and the women have this little section on the other side, on the right side. That same wall, the exact same wall, continues to extend for yards and yards and yards and yards and yards, and when you get toward the end of the wall, there it extends under what was once an arch that's called Robinson's Arch after
Yes.
and at Robinson's Arch, the compromise has been worked out.
Hasn't been.
Yes, it has. It has been worked out. What you're saying is it has not yet been implemented fully.
And you know what? The ball is in play, as they say.
Okay, but in essence, what Sharansky tried to do was create a third section of the wall that would be egalitarian, not where everybody imagines the wall to be. It is the same wall, but by Robinson's Arch.
But, there's a big but, and Sharansky is a friend of mine. Eza Shalom, what a dream did he have, to banish the Torah from the Kotel And
no, that's not what.
Let me let me finish, because I've put this in print already. First of all, there was no serious provision made for Orthodox women who need a mechitza to pray.
Correct.
They were like an
Correct.
afterthought on the side. They could fall off the sun deck.
As far as he was concerned, there wouldn't be Orthodox women there. That was the thinking.
But he was not right.
Okay.
But Anat Hoffman and those who are with her, and there's a good number with her, are mainly interested in reform and conservative prayer styles, which would be mixed gender minyanim. I have no opposition.
Right.
It's fine by me. You know what? I think that we should have that third section at the Kotel proper.
Right, of course.
I think that the denominations shouldn't sell themselves so short and be so eager for a little scrap of recognition that they're willing to go to Mecca to have a place to have their...
It's not Mecca.
Okay, nevertheless, you got my point.
Yes, I do.
So I think that the denominations long ago should have launched their own lawsuits for a rightful place in the sun, so to speak,
I agree.
where our ancestors yearned
Are you saying
to be.
to me, however, the Robinson Arch piece of this also created a breach between you and Anat?
It's not a personal breach.
I understand the philosophical over the Al-Aqsa issue.
Right.
Okay. At one point, were the two of you friends?
Yeah, we were close companions in this struggle.
Right.
But we were not friends like girl talk friends.
Okay, all right.
And I think she has put in she has been funded by the reform movement. And she is now firmly in the reform movement camp. And they, after all, want something finally back for all of their energy and funding. They're not wrong. Everybody's right. Everybody has a point of view that I understand. I also understand, though, that from my point of view, about 300 people can fit into the sun deck that Naftali Bennett set up at Robinson's Arch. That's not 1,000 people or 2,000 people.
Right.
But forget about the women and wanting to pray with women only. Think of the denominations. Why shouldn't we all be in one large place, Klal Yisrael? Who said that the Kotel, which is a national shrine, is a Haredi shul?
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
But historically, it never was. It never was. Prior to the War of Independence, men and women stood together all the time. And even after the Six-Day War, for a period of time, men and women were together, and it was not an Orthodox shul.
Correct.
And then over time, for historical reasons, for sociological reasons, for political reasons, the whole Orthodox sense of the wall developed. It was not intrinsic to the wall. Many American Jews think this was always true.
No,
it was never true.
No.
Okay, I agree with you, but I wanted to come back to the larger question.
Okay.
Larger question is this. While I have enormous difficulty with some of the patterns of Haredi life, and my own instinct is that whether you're a fundamentalist as a Jew or a fundamentalist as a Muslim or a fundamentalist Christian, I'm scared to death of you because you'll kill me thinking you're doing God's work.
Yeah.
But are you equating the difficulties women have in ultra-Orthodox communities with the problems that women have in Muslim countries?
No, but let me tell you where there is one similarity. I mean, the most Haredi woman, you can see her features. She may wear a wig.
And she does have a degree of freedom, which you did not have.
Let me do it. She definitely will be in a profession or have a business or be out of the home and can be, you will know who she is because her face is not masked. However,
can she be beaten?
Yes, but
she can
all
be beaten?
Women are beaten.
Oh, no, but in the Muslim world, it is ritualized. It is sanctioned. There's no sanction of beating a woman in the Orthodox world. Do you know that there are shelters
for Orthodox Jewish
That's because
women?
Because all people and there are men of every group who go crazy. But the reality is, it's not sanctioned.
You're getting hot under the collar.
It's not sanctioned.
That is correct. It's seen as a criminal act.
Right.
But also, when women come forward, they tend to be shunned because they're exposing a shul member who's honored, whose father is powerful, okay? They are shunned.
You're right.
But let me tell you where the similarity is. Similarity is when a woman goes for a get, and when a woman goes to a Sharia court, we're looking at a Bet Din or a Sharia court, both of these systems of thinking run by men are stacked against women, especially mothers. And what happens is she loses custody of her children, and probably a huge sum of money is extorted from her if she is going to keep them. Plus, okay, so other than that, and that's a very central thing, right? It's not morally equivalent in any way. It's different. I'm divided because I know and I'm so close to many Orthodox people who are not Haredim, though. And they will say to me, we'll talk about it. My granddaughter is going to Chabad. These people know how to love children. And they're dvash, they're just made of honey. And I see what a profoundly positive thing that is. So you think, well, for me, could I, for the sake of this goodness, then give up my freedom? For me, the answer is no, for me. Right. But I see that it has a virtue in the world. So I see the positives in each form of worship.
You know, you are a treasure. You're an absolute treasure. And what you've done for the Jewish world, and really for the American scene, has been extraordinary. Phyllis Chesler's new book, right here, An American Bride in Kabul, published by Macmillan. It is a terrific read. What?
Palgrave Macmillan.
Palgrave Macmillan,
Palgrave
exactly right.
Macmillan.
She's right. If you look at the page, it says Palgrave Macmillan. It's a fabulous read. But more than this wonderful book that you've written, and I hope people really pick it up and spend time with it, although I warn you, you won't be able to put it down. It's all the other things you've done as well. You have been really, what, for 40 years now? How many years has it been? You've been writing
since 1967.
Since 1967. You're an extraordinary human being. The clock has grabbed us, but I will not let you go unless you promise to come back, because there are a whole host of issues in addition to the book that I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about where you believe, feminism in America is today. Where has it been right? Where has it been wrong? How do you see it in the Jewish world? And in general, how do you see the future of American Jewry and the relationship of American Jews to Israel, all of which you have very profound things to say in the whole issue of rising anti-Semitism that is just spreading as an epidemic through Europe. So can I have you back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Kol tuva hatzlacha. Fabulous work you've done. Thank you very much. I love you very much. Thank you. Phyllis Chesler. Again, it was contributed to Jewish life and American life as a courageous feminist thinker, author, and Jew.
And writes Divrei Torah.
Where do you write Divrei Torah?
You can go to my website.
What is your website?
www.phyllis, Phyllis, hyphen, or dash, Chesler, CHESLER.com. Go to the top button, Judaism, look at the drop-down menu, press Divrei Torah.
There you go. Do yourself a real favor. Divrei Torah by Phyllis Chesler. It's been wonderful to sit with her. She is one of my favorite people on earth. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to anything you heard Phyllis say today. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. And if you'd like to be in touch with Phyllis, you can email me and I'll forward your emails on to her. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.